Hey folks, welcome to the very first live stream called Role-Playing Ramble, where I am going to riff on role-playing and role-playing game-related topics for X amount of time. I think we're shooting for an hour and a half today. I retain flexibility to make schedule and other adjustments as time goes on. For those who are new to the channel, this is a new thing we've been doing for over a year now. We've been doing a weekly live stream on Monday nights for tabletop war games, and that's been shall we say, wildly successful, far more so than I expected it to be at any point. But we don't have counter clipping to go through during these, so I set it at an hour and a half. I might adjust the schedule. I'm thinking about next time, which is planned right now for 2 weeks from now, to go at 4 p.m. on Sundays. That's Eastern Daylight Time right now. And that would allow folks in the UK to catch the show live, because it's 8 p.m. for them. I wish I'd have thought of that before I scheduled this show, because we're going to talk today about RuneQuest. RuneQuest is our topic, and Glorantha, of course, which we'll also talk about. And that was wild, the UK was and remains a hub for RuneQuest and Glorantha activity. So I have a little more of an outline here than I would typically have for the Wargaming show. We're kind of just getting started. So for those who don't know, my name is Gary. I go by Ardwulf here at Ardwulf's Lair, a channel that is dedicated to tabletop war games and RPGs. And we did some video game stuff back in the past, but we spun that off into its own channel at some point, which does not get a lot of attention, but we did upload a video last week, which is Glorantha related, because we played a little bit of a game called 6 Ages Ride Like the Wind, which is sort of a spiritual successor to the rather legendary video game King of Dragon Pass, also set in Glorantha. This is set in what I take to be Prax. I'm not sure the game actually tells us that. So check that out. There's a link in the video description to all that. There will be a giveaway this evening, and I'm not going to be coy about it. It is the RuneQuest starter set, because I somehow ended up with an extra one. And honestly, I might not, depending on who wins. The way this will work, we'll see how it works, but you're eligible if you're not in the U.S. too, but I'm going to try to ship directly from Chaosium, and I may ask you to share the shipping costs with me, which should turn out to work out okay, because Chaosium actually has a European and I believe Australian shipping location, so we should be able to make everybody happy with that, which does mean that I'm going to end up still sitting on this one, which means there'll be another one to give away at some point. There is a Call of Cthulhu episode in the works as well. I'll have a Call of Cthulhu giveaway of something else that I was stupid enough to buy 2 of. But we're not going to give this away, which I was actually also stupid enough to buy 2 of. We'll talk about that here tonight. So, before we proceed, let's mention that you should please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you are not subscribed already. I don't think I have the subscribing thing poised to go off on this screen here. I'll have to fix that for next week. Too late now. Please do subscribe to the channel if you'd like to help support the channel. Super chats are on, plus super stickers. I have no idea what a super sticker even is. I've never seen anybody use it, so I have no idea. But the Patreon, the merch store, and the Ko-Fi are all linked down in the video description. I got a bunch of RPG-related shirts, including like 2 Traveler shirts, one of which is in storage somewhere, because I didn't want to ever wear it again, because it was starting to fall apart. So I wanted to put it in a frame or something like that in the game room that I don't have right now. So, what is going on with me? Well, if you want to hear more about the wargaming, then tune in tomorrow night. But we are still playing Pacific War. We are still playing OCS. This is the new show. I've already mentioned the things here. We are planning for Origins. I was trying to get into an RPG event at Origins, but my schedule is very limited because we're running this Europa game in the wargaming area in the big dealer's room, not in the dealer's room, but in the big convention hall. And I really only had 1 slot that was available that had something attractive in it, and by the time I got to it, it was sold out. So I am hosed on that. So this will be an RPG-free year for me at Origins. That's unfortunate, but because I'm doing plenty of wargaming and going to plenty of wargaming events, I think what I'm going to do next year is not do wargaming at Origins. I mean, I'll do the coverage, right? I'll do the walkthroughs, and I'll talk to Armchair Dragoons and all that stuff. But I'm probably not going to shoot to play any wargames at Origins next year. And I may actually try to go to another couple of RPG type conventions, like not the Glorantha Con, but the Chaosium Con that they did. There's a Traveler Con in PA. Maybe we'll try and do that stuff too. So, that did not work out. This is normally when I would be getting to the RPG news, but there's really not any RPG news that I want to talk about. This is not a news show, but there may be occasions in the future when there is news I want to talk about. There really isn't right now. But we will get to some stuff in a little bit that is not really newsy, but producty and stuff you can go buy. So we'll take a look at that when we start talking about the Johnstown Compendium. So I should have pulled this off the shelf, actually. So I've just reorganized all this, and I tried not to pull stuff off except where I had extras. So RuneQuest has its sort of genesis in... John Longshore, thanks so much for presumably that is a super sticker. Okay, cool. Thank you. I appreciate that. It helps mitigate the hosing that I'm getting from YouTube on them screwing the algorithm up. Before we get started, actually, let's say hello to Iggy Kricktal, Strelnikov, John Longshore, of course, Michael Schmaus, Bill Simoni, Manders, Jeff Beeler, Chet Bell, Jeff Anderson, Carl Crater from the Wargame Bootcamp, Jeff Beeler, and everything. We're going to talk about. I may do Delta Green as its own show. I mean, it won't shock anyone to tell you that there's a Traveler episode in the works too, and that may be the next episode, but I'm not sure whether it's going to be next or show after next. We will see. For those who don't know, I'm a huge Traveler booster, and we'll end up talking. We'll at least mention Traveler tonight, actually, but as part of the RuneQuest discussion. So let's get into that before we proceed. So the whole RuneQuest project, as in RuneQuest along with its setting of Glorantha, begins to be invented or discovered, as Stafford said repeatedly, in the mid to late 60s when he began writing down these mythologies. In the early 70s, or early mid-70s, I suppose, he founded the company Chaosium, which is, I want to say, the oldest extant RPG publisher. I guess that could be Flying Buffalo as well, but is Flying... I mean, to what extent... I don't know. Flying Buffalo's been bought, and Rick Loomis has passed away. Of course, Greg Stafford has passed away too, but by all appearances, Chaosium's in reasonably good hands. David Imperato, welcome back to the show, as well as Jacob Guernsey. So RuneQuest begins its publication journey in 75-76 with two board games. One called White Bear and Red Moon, and the other called Nomad Gods. And like a lot of the foundational stuff happening in RuneQuest once it became published as an RPG, and really all the way to now, really dates from those two games. White Bear and Red Moon is stuff going on in Sartar, where the Orlanthi have a conflict with the Lunar Empire. And Nomad Gods is set in Prax, which is sort of part of the sort of Dragon Pass and Prax area that is focused on by the new starter set, and there's been some products over the year there as well. Nevertheless, I've always had a bit of an, I've always found Glorantha to be a relatively challenging setting to get into, in part because, a lot of the product is hard to track down, and there's a history, but we'll get into that as we go here. So, very early on, it feels like in the California gaming scene specifically, there were a lot of people in the mid-70s who were fairly dissatisfied with what D&D had going on, right? Flying Buffalo was founded to do play-by-mail games, as I recall. So, but I'm not sure what Flying Buffalo's status is today. That's the problem. Now, they still have a website, so we're going to call them still around. If anybody has questions, by the way, about any of this or RPG stuff, I'll tell you if I don't know, but I'll try to answer questions as well. Yes, you can play. So that's one of the interesting features of RuneQuest is you can play anything that doesn't have a fixed intelligence. So you could play Minotaurs, you could play Brews, you could play, Brews are like these beast men. You can play baboons, you can play, all kinds of weird stuff. And there are also duck people that are in the setting and are less ridiculous than they sound, but at the same time, they're just as ridiculous as they sound. But they're kind of like heavy metal Howard the Ducks, I guess, is how I would describe them. But moving on to that, so in the in the mid '70s, a lot of folks are dissatisfied with D&D, and Greg Stafford is trying to figure out how to do a Glorantha. Glorantha is a thing at this point. There's been 2 published board games, and he's got God knows how much material to publish. So he's trying to come up with something, and they encounter Steve Perrin, who puts, and a team is assembled. There's, without direct access to any of these folks, and both Stafford and Perrin are no longer with us. I'm drawing a lot of this from Designers and Dragons, by the way. Very little is mentioned in John Peterson's otherwise excellent work, which focuses, in a laser-like fashion on D&D, and other games that aren't direct antecedents of D&D are not really dealt with in detail. But Designers and Dragons covers a lot of this, so if you're interested in that, go check that out. Probably the best source for general war RPG in hobby history, I would say, at this, or at least publication history. So what comes out of this is a game called RuneQuest, which is first released in its first edition in 1978. I did pick up, in preparation for this show, a PDF of the original first edition RuneQuest, which is very similar to the second edition. Second edition is cleaned up, it's reorganized. I'm sure there's mechanical differences. I doubt they're major. From a layout perspective, the second edition is better, and this is even a little better than the original second edition was. This is the RuneQuest Classic. This is available from Chaosium for a very reasonable price. It's a very nice 144-page hardcover. And going through this, I picked this up from Chaosium at Origins a couple of years ago. And going through this, I'm like, man, this feels really relevant, actually. This doesn't feel very dated, to be honest. And part of the reason why is that RuneQuest is, as far as I'm aware, some people quote Traveller as the first RPG skill system. And I think that's kind of true. There's also no explicit task resolution mechanic in Traveller, and there is in RuneQuest. And so I think RuneQuest takes the idea to its next step versus what Traveller did. Some people also say bunnies and burrows, but I've looked at bunnies and burrows, and there are skill-like abilities that are basically class abilities. That's how I read them in bunnies and burrows. So I do think bunnies and burrows is a step along the way. That's a Dennis Sustar game released in, I think, 77 or so, 76, 77, from FGU, actually. I believe the first edition was FGU, actually. We are drinking Oban Little Bay because I'm trying. I wasn't going to drink during this stream, but I really would like to get rid of this. So we're going to, probably that's all we'll have. But John Mugg, thanks for joining. Appreciate it. We're trying to move these a little earlier so that people who aren't normally able to catch the Monday streams at 8 p.m. Eastern are able to catch these. At some point, we'll do a Harn video as well, obviously, and because that's another thing that I'm a huge fan of. And I think RuneQuest and Harn are a natural match. But we'll deal with that later, maybe a little bit tonight, but we'll deal with that at a later time. So a second edition of RuneQuest comes out in 1980. And my indication, I never owned the first or second edition until this thing came out, and then I picked up the PDF of the first edition just like a couple of weeks ago. William Ahrens, thanks for stopping by. And Doug Sunsets, thanks for joining as well. So we had 28 people here, considering it's a new stream, new topic. Some people may wander off board, and that's okay. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, was to direct this conversation out to some extent of the Monday night wargame stream. So that's why. So second edition RuneQuest 1980 for a boxed version, which I have handled but never owned, and a 1982 was the hardcover version. And a lot of the more legendary products that came out for RuneQuest came out in the era of second edition. So the kind of the RuneQuest, in some sense, Golden Age happens with RuneQuest second edition. I think Golden Ageism is generally fallacious. And I think to some extent that's true here. However, that said, there are definitely some really great products that came out for RuneQuest 2nd Edition. Specifically, Cults of Prax, which is an absolutely groundbreaking product. Griffin Mountain, which is a groundbreaking product. Well, Cults of Terror was the follow-up to Cults of Prax. And it's actually, I think, a better book than Cults of Prax, although the cults in the book are less interesting, I think, because they're all like evil cults. And I think that's slightly less interesting. The Pavis box set, the big Rubble box set. There was a non-Glorantha box set called Quest Worlds, which I actually had at one point, which who knows where that went. However, I guess Greg Stafford had always wanted to have something published by Avalon Hill. So at some point, sometime around 83 or so, give or take a year, Greg Stafford reaches out to Avalon Hill about Avalon Hill taking over a couple of those board games, specifically White Bear and Red Moon, and maybe Nomad Gods was talked about as well, but if so, that never came out. There was supposed to be a third board game in the series called Masters of Luck and Death, and I think that not only never came out, I think that was never kind of really fully even conceptualized. By that time, there had been a second edition, I don't know that it's called this, of White Bear and Red Moon called Dragon Pass from Chaosium. So the Avalon Hill game, Dragon Pass, and actually they picked up the Elric board game too, from Chaosium. That's White Bear and Red Moon. At some point I need a copy of Dragon Pass, I suppose, but I guess I'd rather have I'd be perfectly satisfied with the Avalon Hill edition. But there's like a ton of background in Nomad Gods that really you have seen very little of elsewhere. I listened to the God Learners podcast episode about Nomad Gods, and it was absolutely fascinating. So, in this discussion, Avalon Hill's like, hey, we would really like to break into this new wargaming stuff, role-playing thing, because it's real popular. And Avalon Hill at the time is a huge company. They are the remaining pillar of wargaming. Remember, at this point, SPI... I'm not sure how clear this was in 1983 that SPI was dead and buried, but SPI was dead and buried. It remained as an imprint at TSR for 5 or 6 years, I think, maybe 7. Some of the last, I just boxed them up to make room for the RPG stuff, but some of the last SPI TSR branded products were things like I think Hunt for Red October might have been one, actually, but also the World War II ETO and PTO, the big box sets that I had like right here or right there for quite a long time, actually, on the Monday streams. So Avalon Hill wants to buy RuneQuest from Chaosium, and Chaosium says no. What they end up doing, the deal they end up working out, is that Chaosium does the development of the products. Avalon Hill is the publisher. Avalon Hill owns RuneQuest, and it owns the game system, but Chaosium owns Glorantha and has the right to approve or deny Avalon Hill's printing of any Glorantha products. Now, exactly where in this discussion it was decided to split the two. From a contractual standpoint, it may not have been the same point at which it was split from a design standpoint. So that's when we get the RuneQuest 3rd edition rules set. Now, this is the later version. They released... The original release was the RuneQuest Deluxe, which this says Deluxe too, but was a box set, which was, I think, $38 in 1984. That works out to be $105 today. That's an awful lot of money. I mean, I would be, conservative about spending $105 on a role-playing course set. Now, it had 5 books and a map, and a booklet of player aids, so there was a kind of a lot of stuff in that box. But that price scared a lot of people off. They later released 2 separate smaller boxes, a player's box and a GM's box. Those actually came out the following year in 85 to try and terrify people less at buying it. And then they did a standard non-deluxe set, which was a sort of a cut-down version of the rules in 1986. But then you'd have things like disclaimers in the products that would say you need the deluxe set to use this. If you have just the standard rules, it will not suffice because you'll be missing spells and codes and blah, 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 blah. So that was problematic. So the other thing that the other big thing that RuneQuest 3rd Edition did, of course, was to split Glorantha and RuneQuest into separate things. There was a Glorantha book and it's still in the perfect bound paperback version. If you can actually run Glorantha out of this book, you're better at it than I am, because it's kind of it's a setting book with a bunch of very high level sort of mythological information and very little of the practical information that you really need to run the game in that setting. So you really kind of needed to run down older product or wait for it to come out from Avalon Hill, which took a long time, which is, one of the things we'll talk about. The default setting for 3rd edition then is this sort of generic, and I think I'm using the word generic aptly here, sort of generic fantasy Earth, where you had sort of, it was kind of ancient world, and it was kind of medieval. It was more ancient than medieval. It was kind of like a Dark Ages thing, but it was never really crystal clear exactly what it was trying to be. And the supplements were all over the place. The 3rd supplement that they did was Vikings, which was a very good supplement on Viking role-playing. But Viking role-playing, you're looking at 800 to 1000 AD. And then, like, supplement number 6 or whatever it was Land of Ninja, which is like feudal Japan, which is like 600 years later. So it's kind of unclear. I think they did that on purpose. I think they left it nebulous. But as a result, it wasn't super useful as a setting, except as this vague idea of, okay, well, we'll set this in, medieval Italy or something like that, right? Lords of the Middle Sea was not part of that sequence, though. I've never really looked at that, to be honest. So a lot of people who were really big fans of RuneQuest and Glorantha were upset by the divorce, if you will, of Glorantha with RuneQuest that they saw in 3rd edition. And there was Glorantha support for it, but not right away. The first expansion was that Monster Chaosium, which I just did a video on. Check that out if you want to see it. It's kind of this, a loosely historical arena combat and chariot racing module. And it's, neat for what it is, but it's like, it's not a setting. And I think the first thing they did for Glorantha may have been Apple Lane, but I'm not sure because I never owned that. They did eventually start doing... Now, you know what? The first thing they might have done was actually Gods of Glorantha, which is a really good product even by Glorantha standards. It's this giant compendium of cults. And you get, like, the Prosopadia, which is this sort of huge list of definitions of the deities of RuneQuest, which is a super important thing. As we talk about Glorantha, we'll get into that. Glorantha is a very mythological setting. Farshad Niazi, thanks for stopping by. Third edition, mechanically, is... all editions of RuneQuest are reasonably compatible with one another. 3rd and 2nd are pretty close. When you start getting into the Mongoose RuneQuest and stuff like that, then you start seeing some significant differences. Old Lady Plays, thanks for stopping by. you start to see some significant differences. We'll talk about that about compatibility as well, because it is kind of a concern. So the other thing that RuneQuest 3rd Edition did was fuck Games Workshop. So Games Workshop had in the UK been massively supporting RuneQuest with White Dwarf magazine, which was the preeminent magazine for role-playing games in the UK, and frankly was probably the best role-playing game magazine anybody was doing anywhere at the time. And now this was after they had produced their first version of Warhammer. I hesitate to add that because they had their own stuff, but they were still pushing RuneQuest fairly heavily. And they were also the publishers of Call of Cthulhu by that time it was happening, right? And this, I think, didn't affect Call of Cthulhu, but it did affect RuneQuest, so they got cut out of the loop. There was an exclusive deal with Avalon Hill. So they had to then go back and cut a new deal with, presumably, Avalon Hill to put out a new 3rd edition RuneQuest in the UK. And they had done such a good job supporting it in the UK that it was the number 2 RPG there. To a greater extent, I think, than it was here in the US, even though it is an American product. And a lot of the folks that I run across that are talking about RuneQuest and talking about Glorantha, even now, end up being UK based. Now, as Doug points out here, there are some reasonably significant mechanical differences between the 3rd edition and the 2nd edition, but there isn't like a complete reimagining of very much either, unless you count sorcery, which is kind of new. Sorcery was new in that edition, and what sorcery was clearly an attempt to fit in the sort of the standard magic usury type of magic that you would see in other RPGs, not D&D specifically, because it works in a very non-Vancian way. It's a spell point system, but it's a magic system that is tonally much more compatible with magic systems that you would see in other RPGs of the early 80s. Okay. The other big thing that I remember that they added was fatigue. They added a fatigue system, which a lot of people found burdensome. I didn't particularly hate it myself, but frankly, you can kind of ignore it too. So it's not the end of the world if you just do that. So there are mechanical differences, but I think the people pointed out those mechanical differences, but I think the real sore point was that Glorantha was no longer the default setting. Now, on the other hand, when I come to RuneQuest is in 1984, okay? When we'd been playing D&D for 3 years or so, and at that point, you begin to identify what you believe are flaws in D&D. It's like, hey, I'm starting to read these Conan stories. I can't replicate this character in D&D. Why is that? I think that's kind of a problem. Here's Elric. I have a problem replicating Elric in this system. And I know there's multi-classing and dual classing and all that stuff, and it was all very, very clumsy. RuneQuest seemed to address a lot of those issues by designing a system built from the ground up to handle something closer to literature. The other thing that it did, which it did not identify at the time, was that some of the literature that RuneQuest is built to emulate is not fantasy literature, but saga literature and epic literature, things like the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Norse sagas, the kind of what we call spirit magic here, and in RuneQuest 2nd edition, is exactly the kind of magic that you see in most of the Norse sagas, for example. It is exactly the kind of thing that Egil Skallagrimsson does, for example, where I put a spell on his axe so it would cleave his foes' skulls. I mean, that's exactly the kind of battle magic, and it's called battle magic, right? That's exactly the kind of thing that spirit magic does in here. So if that's, and that felt weird though, right? I mean, all characters have magic. That's super weird, but that wasn't necessarily limited. Anybody could do that back in the sagas, right? They might not be known for it, or they're not wizards, but they had a little bit of battle magic. If you want to play a wizard, that's what the sorcery system is for. Now, the Glorantha people also objected to the sorcery system, although the sorcery is in Glorantha, and is in every other type. Yeah, I think it's fair to say. I mean, it makes it to Hero Wars and Hero Quest and into the current edition, which is role-playing in Glorantha, which we'll talk about when we get to it. At some point, however, Avalon Hill figures out that, we really do we have this really unique setting that we have at least access to, even if we don't own it, that really makes the system work as they continue to do Glorantha products, that some of which are really good, some of which are really good but quite ugly, like some of the art and some of those is really atrocious. The art in Gods of Glorantha is very good. The art in some of the troll packs that they did later, the troll box sets, is really abominable. But at Avalon Hill, somebody at Avalon Hill talked them into putting a real focus on Glorantha. So they hired somebody to do that. That somebody was Ken Ralston. This is the same Ken Ralston who was involved in a lot of other stuff, but Glorantha in the early days. And later, it turns out to be the lead designer of Morrowind, for example, which is debatably the best fantasy computer RPG of all time. Debatably. I don't necessarily think it is, but I've seen that people make that statement. So under Ralston, there's a bit of a miniature RuneQuest renaissance. I call it the Ralston RuneQuest renaissance, of about 8 or 10 products that are really, really good products again. For all of which are Glorantha products. All the late RuneQuest 3 stuff is all Glorantha stuff. And some of that stuff, Sun County, their version of Borderlands, for example. Now I'm blank because I don't have the list in front of me. Now I'm blanking on. They did a new version of. I'm thinking of Sun County, actually. They did a couple of other. Durastor, that's one that they did as well. That was very well received. That is a bit cheesy, Doug. That is a thing that a game master needs to stamp on, I think. Daughters of Darkness was another one. River of Cradles is the one. My name is First, and I am Funky. Welcome to the stream, first of all. River of Cradles is, in fact, the exact product that I was struggling to find there as well. But eventually, Ralston got demoted to mere freelancer and wasn't in charge of it anymore. The quality dropped off, and the kind of all the gas went out of the line. There is what's called the Lost RuneQuest 4th edition. So apparently some fans, they may have started this on their own, and if you search around on the internet, you could find the document. We're working on a new 4th edition of Glorantha, or of RuneQuest, called RuneQuest Adventures in Glorantha. This was not approved by Chaosium. And it kind of sounds like Greg Stafford ghosted them on it. As a result, the license was pretty much dead. I don't know when it was officially terminated, but it was officially dead at that point. And Avalon Hill decided that they were going to keep the name, ditch the system, and produce a new game by totally different designers. It's totally unrelated, called RuneQuest Slayers. RuneQuest Slayers was, as I mentioned, other than having the name, it had nothing to do with RuneQuest. Not RuneQuest, not Glorantha. The project, I've heard it said that the project was at the printer when Avalon Hill sold out to Hasbro. But Avalon Hill was the printer, so I'm not sure what the dynamics was with that. Because I don't think they sold the printing business. I think they just sold Avalon Hill, the game company. So it could be that it just got dropped by Monarch Printing. That's possible. I'm not sure. So, however, at some point, Avalon Hill sells out to Hasbro, and Hasbro doesn't care. They've got this dead product, another dead product in their IP library. So they hop So the trademark for RuneQuest is permitted to lapse. Okay, and eventually Greg Stafford buys it again. But in the meantime, Robin Laws is commissioned to create here. Well, this is Hero Quest. So is commissioned to create a narrative-based system based in Glorantha, and it's called Hero Wars, and it's in a small digest-sized book. And all of the support materials that I had, anyway, were also in little digest-sized books. It was a weird format. It was hard to shelve. I don't know that it took off particularly. Hero Quest is essentially the second edition of that, which is another trademark that Hasbro had allowed to apparently lapse. So Greg hopped on it. If you recall, Hero Quest was the old board game, which I've heard described as a role-playing game, and it's not. It's a straight board game, but it's certainly, you know, evocative of dungeon RPGs, and it's actually a lot. I had fun with it in the day. Let me put it that way. So Glorantha is kind of on its own parallel support track, and to this day, there's people that prefer Hero Quest, Hero Wars for Glorantha. So I'm not going to talk much more about Hero Quest, Hero Wars, except to note that eventually Chaosium worked out a deal with Hasbro that Hasbro could have Hero Quest back, and they stopped selling all the Hero Quest stuff. And it's going to be the system, which is really quite neat as narrative systems go, is going to be rebranded as Quest Worlds, which is, of course, a name that has Chaosium heritage. Eventually, however, Greg gets the name of RuneQuest back as well, and they still got BRP, right? They don't technically, Avalon Hill got the system, but it's just BRP, right? So then he licenses it to Mongoose Publishing, and Mongoose publishes a product now called Mongoose RuneQuest 1, which is this thing. This is a very slim 90-some page or 128 page hardcover. This is designed by Matthew Sprange, who is, the head guy at Mongoose as far as I can tell right now. And I gotta tell you, it's for people who, had seen RuneQuest 3rd edition, this feels like a very haphazard and incomplete product. The cover is interesting. It's not really bad, but the interior layout is bad. It's on all this tinted paper. It leaves out, a lot of the kind of toolkit stuff that I really liked about RuneQuest 3. Eventually, all that stuff makes it back, right? In a variety of no, this is a totally separate product. This is a narrativist RPG rather than a board game. The board game's pretty good, but Brant, thanks for stopping by, and Mike Burnett, thank you for coming. Yeah, that's the thing. I'm going to say, as a game master, I would say you're really only going to get, for at least each session, you're really only going to get one weapon check. Sorry. You're supposed to be doing it for, it's not intended for you to have, and I don't think this was necessarily as clear as it could have been in 3rd edition. You're not necessarily intended to get a check for every trivial use of this skill, which I think is obvious in retrospect, right? So Mongoose RuneQuest 1 is disappointing to a lot of people. They do bring out Glorantha products, but it's like Glorantha the Second Age. It's like I don't even know. I have none of those products, and nor have I ever seriously looked at them. But it's Glorantha, long ago from where Glorantha, the Gloranthan timeline that folks were familiar with. They also did a whole bunch of extra support products, some of which was not amazing, but they did eventually bring in all of the things that it was missing. But, in order to get the robust toolkit that you had in RuneQuest. Now, one of the things that attracted me because remember, back here in RuneQuest 3, Glorantha's there, but if you just have this, Glorantha's unusable. So you're using, you're treating this. I was treating this as a general toolkit fantasy RPG system, for which I think it is to this day. This book is still really good. I think it's really good at that. There's a successor that we'll talk about in a few minutes here. So I think there was a general agreement that the folks were generally unhappy with RuneQuest from Mongoose. And then Lawrence Whitaker and Pete Nash did a revised version of it called Mongoose RuneQuest 2. And this isn't like a special edition or anything. This is like the regular one. I got this from Noble Knight not that long ago. And this is while not perfect and the layout is still maybe not what it could be, this is a much better rendition of RuneQuest as a generic system than the previous Mongoose edition was. And Mongoose is still supporting this, but so eventually they lose the license. I don't know what the details were. I don't know if they dropped it or it was a mutual thing, or if Chaosium pulled it, or what, or whoever was in charge of the IP at the time. Eventually they lose the license, and there is a rebranded, I don't have any of the product, there's a rebranded product line that's still available from Mongoose in both PDF and hard copy called Legend. It is Mongoose RuneQuest 2. Let's try and organize our thoughts here. So, meanwhile, the design mechanism gets the license for RuneQuest, and Nash and Whitaker and presumably friends do RuneQuest 6. Now this is it's a big hardcover. There's a softcover version too. This is not horrendously expensive, by the way, and it was only around for a couple of years before they in turn lost the license. But this is also no Glorantha in here. There is. This is a powerful BRP driven toolkit fantasy system. It's got your spirit magic, it's got the runes, it's got folk magic, it's got animism, it's got mysticism, sorcery, and theism. The one flaw, if it's got a flaw, is that is what I call the missing core problem. And it's a problem that RuneQuest 3rd edition did not have, because you've got a lot of the character progression and a lot of the magic is based around cults. And 3rd edition at least gave you generic cults. Like, so, okay, you have a storm god. Here's a generic storm god template. And then you can fool with that if you want, whether it's Thor, Odin, or Thor, or Zeus, or whoever, right? Cool. Mac Daddy, thanks for stopping by. And DW118. That is a great question, but I think it's beyond the scope of this discussion today. I lost where I was. So the missing core problem. In RuneQuest 6, you also have weapon styles or combat styles that you also kind of have to... And there are a couple of examples in the book, but there's only a couple, right? There's like 3 example weapon styles and like 3 example cults or something like that. And that's in no way, enough. Now, it's not enough to actually run a campaign with. Bis Nunya, thanks for stopping by. And if you are going to run a campaign, you're probably going to need to develop your own. Now, that's clearly the intention, right? But there is not like a supplement that has that material in it. This is also a problem, by the way, with another game, Ars Magica, where you in order to run a campaign, you need covenants and books and blah, 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 resources and all this stuff, none of which ever appeared in any product, except for resources, which did occur in a limited way in... I don't have a RuneQuest or Glorantha shirt, actually. Hey, it's an RPG shirt. I mean, it was this or one of several Traveler shirts, so you get what you get. So you're missing that, and Once Design Mechanism loses the license, they in turn rebrand RuneQuest 6 as a generic. Where the hell did it go? There it is. They rebrand RuneQuest 6 as Mythras. The two, even the books, I mean, even like the layout, the text, there are some differences. There's some minor terminology changes. There's a couple of very small mechanical differences between this and RuneQuest 6. But it is a wonderful, very powerful, generic BRP-powered fantasy RPG system with all the same, great magic and all that other stuff. You just need to work out a bunch of cults and a bunch of weapon styles and a bunch of brotherhoods and all that other stuff in order to really make it work. I think it's a natural fit with Harn. Off and on, I have I've been working on an adaptation of Mythras for Harn, and you could easily, I mean, there's a decent number of mechanical differences between like Mythras and 3rd edition, but the mechanical approach as hey, we're going to do this historically rooted and or historical literature rooted generic fantasy system. It's not really very generic, to be honest about it, but a toolkit fantasy system, and I think it's really good for that. But in any event, back to RuneQuest. Design Mechanism loses the license. They have Mythras now. We'll do more video on Mythras in the fullness of time. But the rights to do RuneQuest material go back to Chaosium, and that's where we get eventually RuneQuest role-playing in Glorantha and the starter set and the quick start. The quick start appeared before any of that other stuff, and then we saw the core set come out. I didn't write dates down on these things, but it's about 2017. I'm very pleased. They haven't really done that much material. I believe I have everything produced by Chaosium for RuneQuest Roleplaying and Glorantha. The slipcase, the starter set, the 2 adventure books, and the Red Book of Magic, and the Arms and Equipment book, whatever it's called, is coming out now, but that is not quite available in print yet. However, the other thing is, it's this is a game system, a version, an edition of RuneQuest that brings Glorantha back in. Okay, mechanically, it harkens very much back to RuneQuest 2nd edition. There is a fantasy version. There's been more than one attempt to do a fantasy version of Traveler. The current thing you should look at if you're into a fantasy version of Traveler is something called Sword of Cepheus. It's available on Drive-Thru-RPG. And I stupidly didn't get a hard copy. I got a PDF, and I've been looking through it, and it looks nice. And we'll talk about it at some point. So, Tom MC, welcome back to the stream. Oh dear, rewatch Game of Thrones. Anyway, he's quarantined. He's got nothing else to do. I understand. So Chaosium, has some things in the pipeline. There's a cults compendium. I don't know what they're calling it coming. There's a Sartar book coming. There's some other stuff coming. They're taking their time with this stuff. All other things being equal, I'm perfectly happy for them to take their time. But there's another variable: community content outlets. This is the Johnstown Compendium. This is on Drive-Thru-RPG, and anybody, you, me, whoever, is Tom MC. That was okay. That was not a we're not going to talk about that in detail. I will answer questions about whatever, though. We're just not going to dig into Sword of Cepheus. There was another thing called Wayfinder or something like that. That was a more amateur attempt to do a medieval-esque Traveler. There's no reason that can't work. You just kind of need a magic system. So basically anybody can publish through the Johnstown Compendium, and there's kind of a lot of product available, maps and cult books and a lot of adventures, and some of these adventures are really, really well regarded. Boy, there's a lot of these maps. I don't know how they're sorting these things. And some Japanese language stuff too. One of the things that I was lucky enough to grab at half-price books, believe it or not, was 6 Seasons in Sartar. This is the Johnstown Compendium book, and if you just search for Johnstown Compendium RuneQuest, you'll come up with this. But the 6 Seasons in Sartar, this is by Andrew Logan Montgomery. There's a sequel to it as well. This is very well regarded, and the book really, I mean, I assume this is printed on demand, but it's really rather nice. It's full color. The art's pretty good. The layout's good. It looks really good, and I haven't really examined its content yet, but it's very, very highly regarded. I've managed to depopulate most of the shelf. So that is the current status of RuneQuest, and I'll give you my somewhat preliminary opinions on the products, at least the core products. I've done a flip through of the starter set, so check that out if you're interested in that. But the starter set's a really beautiful package. It's really beautifully put together. I do feel like, having looked through it all at this point, and not having played it now, in fact the only RuneQuest role-playing in Glorantha I've played is actually the quick start. But I feel like the starter kit is a little out of order. I would actually have given you the solo adventure first, the Glorantha book next, then the rule book, and then the adventures. And they did not do it in that order. That's unfortunate. Doug Sunseth mentions that 6 Seasons in Sartar is currently on sale for 25% off at drive-thru. So, check that out if you're into that. But a lot of this Johnstown Compendium stuff it looks really impressive. I haven't really looked at much of it other than the 6 Seasons in Sartar, but there's a whole bunch of really interesting things, a lot of which is really well produced with Mark Smiley covers and stuff like that. So it's, this is not slapdash amateur hour crap. There's some major publisher worthy material in there as well, which is not to say that it all looks, I'm sure it's not all equally good, but it means that even though Chaosium's only done like 5 or 6 products so far, it means that there is actually quite a lot of support, even if you don't, just for this edition, even if you don't go back into previous editions, which, as you can see, I've begun to do. There's a lot of support material here. Let's hop back and see if Mike Anthony, you may want to stop wearing that shirt at this point, but you're probably in the same position as you were before, where no one has any idea what it is. So there's that. How many editions do you need? Mike Burnett asks, how many editions do you need to have before you admit that you have a RuneQuest problem? I prefer to see it as a RuneQuest opportunity. And Doug's probably right about the Humacht t-shirt. Sword of Cepheus. I'll put that in the chat. Make sure I spell it correctly. Sword of Cepheus. I'm not looking up the link right now, but if you search for that, you'll find it. It's available on Drive-Thru-RPG in both PDF and print on demand. And at a glance, I haven't really dug into it yet. It does actually look pretty good. Mike says he has almost a complete set of the Mongoose RuneQuest books. They did do a lot of books for it, to their credit. Some of which were, a lot of which were generic, a lot of which were Glorantha, a lot of which were like Michael Moorcock licensed stuff, and other things. So, and I think Doug's right about this too. And kind of think this is a Greg Stafford thing. Doug says that RuneQuest role-playing in Glorantha is a terrible piece of technical writing. I think that's true. I think that's also true of a lot of other RPG things, so that's not as damning as it quite sounds. But I think that's true. There is a lot in that version of RuneQuest that you're kind of going to have to figure out on your own, right? Matters of like, how do I approach this setting? And honestly, I think that's a Greg Stafford problem too, because there were editions of Pendragon like that as well. And a lot of mechanisms from Pendragon make their way into RuneQuest role-playing in Glorantha. Now, I think there's a wonderful game there. I do think you may end up finding the book a bit challenging. That said, I created a couple of characters for it without that much trouble. So there's that. And the characters that will be the outputs of that process are going to end up feeling very well-rounded, very rich characters. New Delta Green, I think, is it Arc Dream? I think it is. Yeah, I think so. I'm not going to pull it down. We'll have a Call of Cthulhu show coming up soon too. So, Dan Webb says that Magic and Traveler is actually tech level 20. One of my irritants with Traveler is actually the lack of support for tech levels higher than 15. Which is one motivation for me wanting to rebuild the tech level system. And that is a thing I've been fiddling with as well in my copious free time. Yes, Doug, that is exactly right. Role-playing in Glorantha is terrible technical writing by the low standards of RPG books. There's a lot of games with that sort of problem. I mean, the Burning Wheel stuff is like that. The Torchbearer stuff is like that. Where the Torchbearer at least tells you right up front, it's like, yeah, the book's not really going to tell you how to play this game. You're just going to have to kind of sit down and start playing and figure it out. I'm not a fan of that approach. At least they were upfront about it, but then again, they actually made the lazy decision to just not bother to try to teach you the game. You're on your own. No, I mean tech level 16 and up, actually. There's not sufficient amount of material available for TL16 either. There's a couple of things like black globes and star triggers, but there's not very much else. Do you get a jump 7? Sources differ. Whether there's a jump 7 or jump 6 that's available at TL16, or jump 6 is the end of the line. I've actually come up with a better post jump drive FTL system that I think is better than Mark's hop drive thing, which is just the same thing times 10. Original RuneQuest. So this sticks a little less closely to that, and I agree with Mike Anthony. I got not only the original RuneQuest, which had the Rurik Saga, which actually kind of tell like a story. These are the examples. There is a similar mechanism used in RuneQuest 3 called Cormac's Saga, and you meet Cormac's friends and allies at various places, and you get these rather lengthy examples of play. And these characters are actually kind of neat, right? So you get like a little bit of story in there as well. And Cormac is unfortunately not a Gloranthan character. Cardboard Casualty, thanks for stopping by. Has a hard time getting into percentile-based RPGs. Just doesn't feel right. Now, a lot of people, I think, feel exactly the opposite about it. Because your odds are always easy to calculate, right? If I've got a 45%, in this roll low system, if I've got a 45% skill, I've got a 45% chance to succeed, right? If there's no other modifications to the roll. The other thing with RuneQuest Adventures in Glorantha is that there are some streamlining that was done in the latest edition of Call of Cthulhu that I think RuneQuest Adventures in Glorantha would have benefited from. I really want to take a look at Snakepipe Hollow, by the way. I was just listening to the God Learners podcast where they talked about that a little bit, and apparently it's a very sandboxy that appeals to me. Now, there are percentile systems and percentile systems, right? Like, I would not feel particularly under pressure to have like a calculator in a Call of Cthulhu or RuneQuest, but for Rollmaster, you needed a calculator. I mean, it's the guy that didn't refuse to use a calculator was the guy we were always waiting for. There's a lot of I really feel like the more recent adventures are very strong, by the way. The stuff in the Smoking Ruin is really good. The stuff in the starter set is really good. That second adventure in the starter set is great. It's very Glorantha. It's the kind of thing that you cannot run that adventure outside of Glorantha. Griffin Mountain is a giant wilderness hex crawl. Which is great. Oh, John, yes, you can come up with your own post tech level 15 stuff. That's what I'm talking about, though, and that's kind of what I'm doing, right? I'm kind of working that out, and I'm actually going all the way up to tech level 30, which is completely fantastical reality bending stuff, of course, but. So, it's probably worth Baraxis MF. Thanks for stopping by, and Sagacious Hamster. Thank you for stopping by. So I never had Griffin Mountain until the reprints became available, and at which point I ordered it, and it is pretty impressive. But I did have Griffin Island, and I'll talk about this in the upcoming video on Griffin Island. I got stuck. I was pretty impressed with Griffin Island at the time, right? In retrospect, it does suffer, if you compare the two products, it suffers from a lack of higher level context that you have when you're setting it in Glorantha. But I still think it's an excellent product on its own. At some point, we'll do a Harn episode. I promise. So, there's really not adventures in Griffin Island. There's really kind of locations, and you kind of go there and do things. It's very, very sandboxy and very hex-crawly. Old Lady Plays asks about good spy RPGs. I actually think that the James Bond 007 RPG was really good and really innovative. I know a lot of people liked Top Secret. I was never a particularly big fan. If you can track it down, there's one from Hero Games. It uses the Hero Games system, so if you're not comfortable with that, then this is not a good option. But there's one called Danger International from Hero Games, which was back in the day before there was like a unified hero rule book. But they were starting to release games that were not superheroes using their system. If I were going to do a spy game, I would almost certainly run it in GURPS, to be honest. I don't have a better option for modern gaming than GURPS. I would love to have the Pavis and Big Rubble boxes, but I'm realistically going to order the classic reprints instead. It will save me hundreds of dollars. Knights Black Agents is a supernatural game. It is kind of Secret Agents, but it's Secret Agents versus vampires. It's pretty neat, actually, and I would recommend it. I didn't really get into Spycraft, but I was not that in love with the D20 system that I needed to. I will say that from what I saw of the Spycraft material, it did look pretty good. Yep, that's true. Espionage Inc., I think, was what it was called. And then it was re-released as Danger International. Mike Anthony, I believe, is correct. Cults of Terror and Cults of Prax. Cults of Prax was an absolute, People must have had the tops of their heads blown off by that thing at the time. I remember, and I say that because I never saw that until like 2 years ago. D20 Modern. Nah. I mean, hey, if D20 Modern works for you, by all means. But I don't like the way. I mean, I guess the classes are the way it handles classes is interesting. Let me put it that way. But I saw God. This would have been about 1991, I think. Sounds about right. When I saw Gods of Harn, I was blown away by that. And frankly, Cults of Prax is in a lot of ways a better book than Gods of Harn is. I actually really like the Harnic Pantheon, but Cults of Prax is really interesting and also shows you how to handle those things mechanically. Where Gods of Harn doesn't do that. Harnmaster Religion does, but then you need to be using that game system. And it's a little harder game system. It's also a percentile system, by the way. And I think also heavily influenced by BRP. I mean, it goes without saying that RuneQuest was super duper influential. The approach that RuneQuest took with skills is the approach that hundreds of other game systems took after RuneQuest, right? Not everyone. I think some of the newer ones where you kind of invent your own skills, or you have like a really constricted skill list, something like Exalted or something like that. Those maybe don't lean on RuneQuest quite as much, but all the other games do that have skill systems. Moochie Decat says Harn was very inspired by the Tekkamel system, and I think Cults of Prax was too. Maybe. So think about what was available. So Tekkamel's system, no, I don't think that Harn was inspired by it mechanically at all. Setting-wise, yes, I absolutely think that's true. Cults of Prax, however, is a 1981 product, and I'm struggling to remember exactly what was available that talked about the gods of Tekkamel at that time. It may have been that the Swords of Glory Volume 1 was available at that time. It might have been, but I didn't check the date on that. And I kind of feel like they're looking at, having read Swords of Glory Volume 1 cover to cover and having read that Gods chapter, I think there's not really a close comparison there. I mean, there's certain tonal qualities that the Tekkamel gods have that the Harn gods have too, but I don't think those are shared particularly by the gods of Glorantha. Now, to say that I think Robin was inspired by Tekkamel as a setting, I think that's obviously true. I think you can see that. I mean, there's a plane of Tekkamel in Harnmaster Gold. So, but mechanically, that original game system is just a D&D variant that I think nobody was particularly happy with. Well, I shouldn't say that. There's people that still like it, actually. But there's still people that swear by White Box D&D, too, and I don't understand those people either. Yep, we did start off, Sagacious Hamster, with a discussion of White Bear and Red Moon. You can, but Nomad Gods is even harder to find. Yeah, I do think Harn, yes. Glorantha, it's a lot harder to see, I think. And again, I'm making some inferences there by when the products came out. I'm pretty sure the first product that really talked about the gods of Tekkamel in detail was Swords and Glory Volume 1, I think. So 49 folks, 50 folks are in the chat right now. So everybody, thanks for stopping by. 55 was our maximum. So I don't know what's up with that. I'd have to... That stuff's in the storage. My Tekkamel stuff's in the storage unit. Doug, don't feel bad. I actually stumbled across that particular factoid not very long ago either. I'm working on a thing that... whereby I stumbled across that factoid where Danger International was originally released as Espionage Incorporated. probably best Hero Games non-Champions independent game before it became one unified thing was probably Justice Incorporated, and it's got a cover that was so good that it's been reused at least twice. A cover that is it just screams pulp. So I actually feel like, back to Glorantha though, and I think we're going to do a giveaway in a couple of minutes. Let me pull up my trusty oh Jesus. Anyway, I've always found Glorantha, and I've said this before. I've always found Glorantha fairly challenging to get into. And part of that is just because of, it's never been that well explained, right? And until very recently. I really feel like you kind of have to decide, hey, I'm going to take a book that is like a description of something in Glorantha and read that. And then we're going to do our campaign based on that. And then if I want to pull in support material from other places, then I can do that. Though I do have Lost Gods, actually. And those are in a couple cases, actually, those feel a little closer to Techimal deities than the ones that we saw in Harn. But I still think you can see the influence in the Harnic pantheon to the Techimal pantheon. I think that's pretty clear. It's just, Agric to Vimula specifically. Lands of Mystery is one of the all-time great supplements. I completely agree with Doug here. At some point we might do a hero system. I haven't planned this or put it on the list of things to plan, but at some point we may do a hero system episode as well. We'll certainly do a GURPS episode at some point. So, but this I picked up for a reasonable price from Noble Knight not too long ago, and it's a nice book. I could have seen getting back into RuneQuest based on the strength of this book, and they did pretty good support for it as well. I think if you are new to Glorantha, I think you start with the stuff that is my advice is to start with the stuff that Chaosium is doing now. Start with the starter set. Go through, and it's not just so there's a Glorantha book in the starter set. Don't just read that. Read the Johnstown stuff, which is actually the back half of the book, which is actually fairly dry. But then read the adventures, or try to play the adventures if you can. The adventures will help to illuminate the setting for you. The bestiary, reading that will help to illuminate the setting for you. The nice thing about the way the setting is developed in the core book, not the starter set, but the core book, is that it focuses on areas, right? It gives you Dragon Pass, Prax and Dragon Pass. So you've got like Prax, the Animal Nomads part of Prax, not the River of Cradles part. Okay, that's mentioned, but you don't really get much there. I think you start with that material, and then pick one of those locations. Pick Sartar, which is the natural one to start in, but Sartar or Tarsh or the Grazelands or whatever, and set your campaign there. The Johnstown Compendium means that you have a lot of material available. Unfortunately, some of the really cool looking adventures, like the what's it called? The Sun County Militia stuff. That stuff looks really cool, but we don't really have full information on Sun County either. So the Worms. So back in the day, Chaosium was doing two magazines. They were doing Worms Footnotes, which was the Glorantha magazine, the Glorantha / RuneQuest magazine, and they were Sandheart. Thank you. That is what I was thinking of. That is I think 4-volume series available through the Johnstown Compendium. You can get PDFs or you can get hardcovers, and they look really good. but pick one of those areas and just read that material and take that material as sort of the basis, because that gives you that I think plays to the great strength of Glorantha, which is sort of that local information about the cult. And I think you get most of the cults that you maybe don't have all the cults that you would need in the book, but you got most of them. So I think you're okay. And then First and Funky recommends the Glorantha source book as like the next step. That is this book. This is also very good, but this gives you a lot of very high-level information that's not necessarily actionable in your campaign. And I guess I should call that the orbital perspective problem, right? This gives you kind of the orbital perspective of Glorantha and the history of the Lunar Empire and all this other stuff. And it'll give you a lot of background. It's a really good book, but you don't have really enough, I don't think you really have enough material to run a campaign in here, unless you're either using another product to pull that local information, or you're making it all up, which is fine, but, then you're making it all up, right? But if all that rich mythology, Glorantha is an incredibly mythologically rich setting. A lot of that can be found in here, and really, debatably, all you ever need. Now, if you do want the definitive coffee table treatment of Glorantha globally at a relatively high, but not this high level, then you have the Guide to Glorantha. And I don't know how much longer this thing's going to be available. You can get it in PDF, but it is a slipcase set with 2 huge coffee table books that basically give you, it gives you some information on every single region of Glorantha. It is like a definitive book on the setting from which other developers will be able to develop more local material. But you need the local material to run an adventure, right? You don't need... This is why the very common campaign advice when you're doing a campaign world is don't start with a world map. Start with a local area and just develop that, and then you have some place to start. And because the world map's worthless unless you have a place to start. So you need the local area. The Shadow World, the original Shadow World, and actually the later ones too, Shadow World Master Atlas for Rolemaster was terrible in this regard. It was like this super global information. And it's like I had no idea of how to set a campaign in this thing because I had no local info. David Imperato, thanks for stopping by. I suggest chloroform. So one of the things that is on my short list of things to grab is some stuff from the Johnstown Compendium. The Lost Gods product. We will be talking about this in greater detail when we come to the Harn episode. But that is from Celestia Publications. I will put a link in the chat. I don't know if they've done anything lately, but that is where I got it. And they have only one printed product, I think, which is the Harnic Tarot, which I probably should order, but I haven't gotten around to yet. All right, let's do the giveaway. I'm going to pull down. Then again, our giveaway here is the thing on the bottom. Is the RuneQuest starter set. Worldwide, we're gonna pick numbers for it. We're gonna do this the old-fashioned way. I'll have people pick numbers between, say, 1 and 50. You can put those numbers in the chat right now. Numbers between 1 and 50. If you're in the U.S., shipping is courtesy of me. If you are not in the U.S., I will probably ask you to help me with the shipping by splitting it 50-50 with me. But I think that because Chaosium has UK and Australia-based warehouses, I think that won't be a problem. So let's pull up. Our guy here. All right, we'll let this run for a moment or two, and then I'll put a cutoff. Now, I do have some other stuff to give away. I have a copy of one of the one of the Call of Cthulhu adventures, which we'll do when we do the Call of Cthulhu episode, which it'll be in the next couple episodes, right? So right now, I reserve the right to change the schedule, but the schedule says that the next episode will be 2 weeks from now. Now, next week in this time slot, I may try to do another video game stream. We'll see. We'll see what happens. And that will be available on Twitch, if that happens. It will be available on Twitch and will be then uploaded to the digital channel the following Wednesday. So check that out. So if you want to check out the digital channel or the Twitch channel, they're all linked in the video description. So check those out, subscribe, follow, blah, 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 blah. So everybody, now we're going with first number. So if 3 people get 47, for example, then we're going with the first person who put that number in. I'm about to cut it off, so get your requests in. Mike Anthony also has 2 copies of the starter set, apparently. Nope, just 1 to 50. There's only 51 people in the chat, so 52 people in the chat, so I don't need to go higher. And not everybody's going to enter, so. If nobody gets the exact number, we will draw again. Ken, thanks for stopping by. 1 to 50. 1 to 50, not 1 to 100. All right, I'm cutting it off. I'll give Ken a chance to put something different in. Searball 1600. That looks Welsh, so I'm probably not pronouncing it correctly. That is very likely. Iggy, you only get your first number. So, your first number less than 50 anyway. All right, so I hope everybody has enjoyed this. We've gotten a good turnout here. You know, you never know. I never know when this thing is gonna. I got 4 people here, right? I think 3 or 4 people. I think I had 3 people watching the video game stream, but that's on Twitch, right? So, this is why we're also looking at running these streams in StreamYard in the future, so that we can use the StreamYard automated dealio, and it saves everybody a lot of trouble. So, but I figured this was an acceptable methodology for tonight. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. All right, I'm going to cut it off. I am Ardwulf on Twitch, too. There is a link in the video description. There should be a link in the video. If there's not a link in the video description, tell me that, and I will fix that. All right, it's cut off. I'm going to roll the number. 47 again? Seriously? Okay. Okay, Adam Lee is the winner. We got a 47. I think Adam Lee saw 47 here. We all saw me hit generate and generate a different number, and we got 47 again. That is statistically unlikely, but it can happen. So Adam Lee is the winner. So Adam, here's what you do. You email me at ardwulfslair@gmail.com and give me your address. Mention that you won the RuneQuest starter set too, so I don't screw it up. Send you the wrong shit. That would be embarrassing. So send me your address and we will work it out. Like I said, I'll ask you to split shipping if you're not in the U.S., but if you are in the U.S., I'll just stick it in a box and off it goes. And I should be able to get that out in the next few days. Tomorrow is looking incredibly compactified. So we might not get it out tomorrow, but we'll get it out by the end of the week if nothing else. So congrats to Mr. Adam. You'll find that a lot of Twitch streams are like, I don't get it, right? I don't get it. But my Twitch streams are not that. I don't do Twitch streams all that often, so it's not. It's much more like this and much less like your average Twitch stream. Also, if you are, I'll ask folks too, since we're gonna wrap up now. I'll ask folks if you have ideas for new shows in the RPG stream series. Let me know in the video comments, so that I can collate those, and I have like 3 or 4 planned, but I'll eventually run out of ideas. So be sure to mention those. So let me go back to what's coming up. So tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, we are going to have the Counterclipping Show. That is the weekly Wargame stream. It's a lot of fun. So stop by if you're into tabletop Wargames. Or if you're not and just want to hang out, that's cool too. I will probably answer, at least for the moment, I will certainly answer role-playing questions in the chat if anybody's got questions. Hey, Adam, if you do that, Jeff Beeler says you're going to have to start a RuneQuest game, which would be awesome. If so, yes, you should definitely report back. Everything you need to get started is in that box. Tuesday, there is a Traveler Tuesday video. I'm very excited about this video because it is the classic Traveler character creation walkthrough video. Took a lot of time to put together, more than you'd think. A lot of editing was required because I'm an idiot, but it was a lot of fun to do, and I hope that folks enjoy it. Tuesday night we have the stream with Dan Pancaldi of No Enemies Here. We'll be talking about some kind of wargame thing. There isn't enough material to play Ducks or Brews in the starter set. I will tell you that. But once you have the bestiary, anything without a fixed intelligence, you can play. So, RPG gimmicks, yeah, good gimmick mechanics, actually. Now, one of the things, and I'll be honest here. Let me finish up with what's coming up. So Tuesday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, we have the stream with Dan. That's on this channel. It rotates between channels. It's on this channel. We almost never talk about RPGs on that channel. On Wednesday, we have the overview and flip-through video of Griffin Island from Avalon Hill. I got a copy of that recently. On Thursday, we have a Wargame unboxing of the new edition of the African Campaign from Compass Games. And I hope to have a bonus unboxing on Friday. And then, like I said, next Sunday, I would like to try to do a 7:30 Twitch stream, but we'll see if that actually happens. Yes, that's true too. First and Funky mentions the RuneQuest Gloranthic Game Master screen pack. That is in the slipcase. If you have the slipcase, you have that. There's like an adventure or two in there. I think there's like 3 adventures in there, and a whole bunch of extra stuff. So that is actually a good point. Chris Saunders, thanks for stopping by just as we are wrapping up. So I actually have Dan Webb. Oh, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for that, Dan. Thanks so much for your support. It really is appreciated. So if Adam is in Bangladesh or someplace like that, Dan is helping out on the shipping. I have a pile of boxes. Nomad Gods, you might be able to find a copy of the rules for Nomad Gods online somewhere. I don't know. I haven't looked. But there is a Vassal module for it. It's let's say that the graphics are primitive. Now, I do have a hard stop at 9 p.m. for this show. So if we switch to 4, I'll schedule the show so people are subscribed to the channel will see the cards and all that stuff. But if we're stopping at 4, if we're starting at 4, I don't have a hard stop. Now I have a hard stop because my wife starts streaming on her Twitch channel at 9. Well, I don't know if she's doing it on her channel tonight or not, but she's streaming and may need to use the bandwidth. So we are at our hard stop. So I do want to thank everybody for stopping by for this new and experimental thing. We had excellent turnout, so we will definitely be continuing this. Stay tuned. The next one of these shows, even if I change the schedule moving forward, will be 2 weeks from tonight. I'm not sure if it'll be at 7:30 or 4. So we'll see how that goes. I have no idea what they're playing tonight. They're maybe Satisfactory or Raft or something like that. Who knows? So everybody have a great night. We'll see you all again next time. And if not